Hi, welcome to the Personal History Hub. This video is going to be looking at the March on Washington, which happened on the 28th of August, 1963. So, why did the March on Washington happen? So, after Birmingham, the civil rights groups wanted to maintain their impetus and sought to commemorate the centenary of the freeing of slaves in 1863 in America. The idea of a huge March on Washington was put forward by Philip Randolph. He was helped by Bayard Rustin and Cleveland Robinson. The key groups of the NAACP, CORE, SNCC, and the SCLC took part in organising the march. King was keen to have the march because he knew that there were those in the movement who felt that progress was slow and who might drift towards violence if the high profile was not sustained. Indeed, the Washington police halted leave for its 3,000 officers and called on the services of 1,000 police officers from neighbouring locations in case there was any violence that broke out. There were also 2,000 members of the National Guard on standby. President Kennedy also feared violence at the march and he asked the organisers to actually call it off. The march initially was there as a cry for jobs and freedom, but its aims broadened to cover those of the whole of the civil rights movement, and there was naturally a demand for the passage of Kennedy's civil rights bill that he wanted to introduce. So just to show you the scale of the march, that shows you just how big the March on Washington actually was. So what actually happened at the march? When the march took place, there were about 250,000 demonstrators. It's been estimated that there were around 80,000 white supporters there. The organisers had expected less than half this figure. People came from all over the USA by plane, train, bus, and car. It was broadcast live on TV around the world, and when senators and congressmen were seen, there were chants of "pass the bill," referring to Kennedy's civil rights bill. Before the speakers, Bob Dylan sang several songs, one of which was called "Only a Pawn in Their Game," and he was joined by other protest singers. Not all speakers were moderate in their approach. John Lewis of SNCC was forced to amend his speech, but even so, the one he delivered was very powerful. Despite fears the protests would turn violent, it was peaceful and good-humoured, and there was no violence involved. So there's Bob Dylan performing. The significance of the "I Have a Dream" speech. So King was the final speaker of the day, and his speech has now become part of the legend of the struggle for civil rights, and possibly one of the most famous speeches of all time. He used his skill as an orator and included many biblical references, which appealed to all sections in society. In the speech, he quoted from the American Declaration of Independence and looked to a future where he saw racial equality in the USA. Although there were some critics, so Malcolm X called it the farce on Washington. I'll do another video on Malcolm X as well. The March on Washington was hailed a great success for the civil rights movement. It was televised across the USA and did much for the movement. It brought together different sections of US society and put further pressure on Kennedy to move forward with the civil rights bill. So this is an extract from King's speech, just to give you a little bit of a taste of what he was saying. He said, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day in the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character." So there's King giving his speech to the crowd, with the press involved at the side as well. So what were the effects of the March on Washington? So after the march, King and other leaders met Kennedy to discuss civil rights legislation. Kennedy was keen to let them know of his commitment to the Civil Rights Bill. However, all those at the meeting were aware that there were many Republican Party politicians still opposed to change. No opposition politician in the Senate changed his mind about Kennedy's Civil Rights Bill. So that means that all of those that were going to vote against it beforehand, before the March on Washington, were still against it after the effect of the March on Washington. So in terms of its effect on Congress, it didn't really have a huge effect. King's hope seemed like an illusion because in September 1963, 4 black girls were killed in a bomb attack while attending Sunday school in Birmingham, Alabama. Violence erupted on the day of the bombing and 2 black youths were killed in the aftermath. However, the March on Washington was significant because of the size. So it showed huge support for civil rights across America, including white support as well. The federal nor state governments could argue that it was a minor issue anymore. With the 250,000 people turning up to the march, there's no way they could deny that it wasn't playing on people's minds in a big way. Who saw it made it a big significant issue because it was broadcast live on TV in the USA and other countries, which also put pressure on the US government. The crowd, there was black and white people protesting together peacefully. It also showed support for civil rights from all classes because there was famous people that turned up too. And King's speech itself. So King's speech was powerful as it gained more support for civil rights. It also meant that people saw King as the leader of this movement. Okay, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Personal History Hub. The next video is going to be on the role of President Kennedy and President Johnson.